we were able to kind of backwards plan our way into this lifestyle. But if that's not clarified, you'll just kind of always be in this chase success mode that, and you'll never even know what success looks like when you get there. It's always this bridge too far. So that was the biggest difference for us, I'd say.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I'm excited to have you check out today's episode. But listen, before we jump into that, if you are an avid listener of the show and got some great value from previous episodes, leave us an honest rating and review. It helps us and helps other listeners find great shows like this. And if you haven't done so, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we're going to be talking to Kirby Atwell. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. Now, after growing up in the south suburbs of Chicago, Kirby Atwell served 11 years on active duty in the U.S. military, first attending the United States Military Academy at West Point, and then traveling the world as an officer in the Army. Now, during this time, he developed a strong interest in real estate entrepreneurship. He began studying and reading as much as he could on the topic and bought his first rental property back in 2006. Today, Curry primarily focuses on investing in high cash flowing vacation rental properties. He owns a portfolio of vacation rentals in northern Indiana, where he lives on a 45-acre farm with his wife and young kids. Let's welcome to the show, Kirby Atwell.
Hey, thanks, John. It's really awesome to be here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Kirby, I went over your bio and background at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Sure, yeah. So I guess starting with my upbringing a little bit, I kind of had the whole rich dad, poor dad experience in my household because my dad worked for the city. He was the director of a park district in the suburbs of Chicago. Very stable job, 9 to 5. Got the paycheck on the 1st and 15th and a retirement. And my mom, when we were really young, started her own insurance brokerage, selling health insurance to companies. And she started with 0 clients, just work. It was all 100% commission, eat what you kill. And so we got to kind of witness both growing up. And it was a great experience. I was always really drawn toward my mom's business, of that lifestyle of the harder you work, the more you can make. There's no cap on your income. And that always was really appealing to me. So I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to serve in the military, though. We have a history of military service in my family. So decided to go to West Point. And then, like you said, after I graduated, I picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that really was what made me decide on real estate. And so I took that entrepreneurial drive and kind of focused it on real estate investing and bought some properties while I was in, and then got out in 2011. And that's when I really hit the ground running. I started a flipping company initially with a couple friends of mine who I grew up with. And it was okay. I think that's where a lot of people start. They think, well, it's a great way to make a whole bunch of money quickly is flip properties. And you can, but building a flipping business where, everything, your whole business relies on you doing 3, 4, 5 flips a month. That's very different than doing the occasional flip that can make a little extra money. And so it was a difficult thing to scale. You don't see a whole lot of flipping companies at scale because it's a very tough thing to scale. And so over time, I realized after about 5 years of that this was going to be a treadmill I was never going to get off of. And that's when I got into rental properties and really started understanding cash flow.
Yeah, I loved hearing you talk about that. One, you talked about your background with your parents, watching one person be an entrepreneur, watching the other parent have that, more secure 9 to 5 job and leaning more towards that entrepreneurial approach, going to West Point, joining the military. Thank you for your service.
Thank
But
you.
as while during this the service, you are reading books, you come across Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that kind of crystallizes some of the experiences you had growing up, right? Maybe things you couldn't put in context or quite, tie together that book probably
Exactly.
helped crystallize some of those concepts, and you kind of really embarked down that path. Started with real estate, looking to do some flips, had a flipping business, and then ultimately realized that that was really a treadmill. It's hard to really scale that and make it a passive business, if you will. So that kind of led you to rentals. You also mentioned that you started that business with friends. I know a lot of times when people are getting started, that seems like the right thing. Like, oh, let's get a couple buddies, let's go into business together. Talk to me more about that experience. But did you think that worked well for you, or would you give somebody advice who is maybe looking to start investing in real estate with their buddies?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. It's something that I've thought a lot about over time, because I've seen so many failed partnerships over time. Luckily, these are good friends of mine. We're still friends to this day, but it's I think it's Dave Ramsey who says the only ship that won't sail is a partnership, because over time it's very difficult. There's very few partnerships that last the distance, because what we did is we formed a business together, and so we had an operating agreement where we're in it. And if you do that, you're basically in a marriage, and you have to be on the same page about everything, about marketing, about what your strategy is, about everything. And so we had these long like committee meetings to make any decisions because we all had to be on the same page. And so I don't recommend that strategy. I love partnering, but what I tell people today is form your own business. You can make all the decisions you want around marketing, around borrowing money, around all the big decisions, but then JV with other people. And you can just draw up a one pager JV agreement on a specific deal that somebody else brings something unique to the table that you don't have, so you can still benefit from a partnership, but you're not married. After that deal's over, you can continue to partner or you can go your separate ways, and there's no commitment long term and unwinding of a big business once you've built this kind of behemoth over time. And I think that's a much better strategy.
I think it's smart, right? And I tell the people the same thing is that, going back to that, dating versus marriage analogy, if you are doing a JV or a partnership where you still have your own entity and you guys are coming together for a deal, if that deal doesn't work out, okay, you have that deal together, but it's not like everything you've built has been intertwined with this other individual or their company. You can go off and kind of build your own thing versus when you do build it together, you really do want to make sure that you all are aligned. And a great piece of advice I got from one of my mentors was that if you are going to form a partnership, you want to make sure that that partner is an expert or at least has the knowledge to execute whatever it is that they're being asked to do. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I thought it was interesting when you started talking was I think a lot of times newbies partner up because it just feels better to
Yes.
have a friend, but both of you know nothing, right? So
Yeah.
no one's bringing any
Right.
expertise to the table versus if one of you are really good at say acquisitions and somebody else was really good at the renovations. Okay, a partnership makes sense there because the roles are kind of identified. But when you have two people who are just trying to figure this thing out and you don't know what you don't know and you're both, just sitting there looking at each other throwing spaghetti against the wall, it's setting yourself up for failure. So I would say if
Exactly.
you're going to partner, I like what you said, either do it separately where you build your own thing and then come together as a JV, or be really intentional about the role and the specific talents and skill set that you're looking for in a partner. Let's fast forward though. You talked about that. So that business started off. You ended up realizing that just wasn't going to be the right fit, moved over to rentals. At what point did you start to explore kind of short-term rentals and kind of this new avenue of, really creating not just the long-term rentals, but these shorter mid-term rentals?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in 2000, so from 2011 to 2016 was the 5 years I ran the flipping company. We did about 70 flips around Chicago, either in the city or suburbs. So we learned a lot, obviously, about rehabbing, about running a business, but didn't have cash flow. And so in 2016 is when I was like, I'm gonna take what I've learned, go out on my own. My partners want to continue flipping, which I said, great, you can continue with the business, but I'm starting from scratch all over again, and I'm going to build cash flow. And so started buying small single family houses that I could rehab and rent to homeless vets through this HUD VASH program, which is where homeless vets can get a voucher similar to a Section 8. And it works really well in the south suburbs of Chicago, where the rent rates are high, that the payment standards really high for this program, but the cost of properties is pretty low. And so so it worked really well. We built up a portfolio of 24 units pretty quickly. But then my wife and I were moving over to Northwest Indiana from the south suburbs of Chicago. And when we moved over there, it didn't work well in Northwest Indiana. And so I was looking for another strategy locally. And we, at the same time, moved into our new house that was a 1970s all original house near Lake Michigan. And so we were rehabbing it, and we had this big, walkout basement that wasn't being used for anything, unfinished. And so as we're rehabbing, we're like, what if we just turn this into a separate one-bedroom apartment and tried out this Airbnb thing that we keep hearing about? This was 2017. And I was like, it's $30,000 more to finish the basement and do this. So what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't rent on Airbnb, and we rent it as a long term, and it adds a bunch of equity to the house. So pretty low risk. And so we tried it, finished just before Memorial Day weekend, 2018, and put it on Airbnb, and it just started booking out like crazy. And so I was like, man, we made over $20,000 that first summer, and I didn't make $20,000 on some of the small houses that I owned in the whole year. So I was like, there's something to this. If I can do this on a tiny one-bedroom windowless basement, then I can probably make even more money on some houses. And so that's really when we started to dig into it, and so many lessons learned in the beginning. But we started to build our portfolio from there.
I love it, man. You talked about, really taking your own experience when you moved from the, south suburbs to Northwest Indiana and being close to Lake Michigan, building out your own home, adding that unit basically within the home and just testing it out, realizing that your risk was low. I mean, worst case, you have a really nice in-law suite type
Yeah.
situation. In best case, you have a great cash flowing unit, which is ultimately what it became. So that worked out really well. Talk to me more about kind of your business plan today. Like, coming back, that was 2017, right? So
Mhm.
where have you been since then? Like, what does the portfolio look like, and how do you approach the market?
Yeah. So, like I said, there was a lot of lessons learned from there. So we decided at that point, we're going to try this separately from our own house and see how this works. And so I started with a single family home in Michigan City, which is a town nearby where we're living here in Northwest Indiana. And I bought it for $39,000, and it needed a full rehab. So we had about 100,000 into it, but I knew this property would work great as a long-term rental if this just fails. And that's always been my backup, is like all my properties work well as long-term rentals. And so it tested out, and again, same experience, it just booked out like crazy. And so then we started building a portfolio from there. And at the same time, I decided to sell off all my long-term rentals because this just made so much more sense. The cash flow was so much higher. The property stayed in tip-top condition. It was just, it just, it made a whole lot more sense. We just enjoyed it a lot more. Um, and so we started buying a few single family homes, but then we realized that if we scaled this into small multi-units, so 2 to 4 unit properties, we could still get the 30-year fixed DSCR loans that we were getting at a pretty low interest rate. And the net cash flow on these was just off the charts. I mean, it's like insane, because you can buy 3, 4 unit properties for 200, 300, $400,000. And when you start to look at the short-term rental income on 4 different units coming in on a $300,000 property, it's several $1,000s a month. And so our ROI was like no other sector I could find in real estate. I mean, we're over 100% cash on cash return on a lot of our properties. And so we started building that out, and that's still what we're doing today. We just finished and listed last week it's a 2 unit, it's a single family house with an ADU, or a coach house, in the back in Michigan City. Bought it for 94.9. We're all into it for 200 to make it just over 200 to make it just beautiful, and it should cash flow about 2,500 a month after all of our expenses. So we've just done these deals that are extremely affordable, but extremely high cash flowing. and built up a portfolio. So now we have 24 that are active. We have 6 more that we're working on right now, and it's just been, it allowed me to leave my full-time job. So we don't have to work. About 2 years ago, I left my full-time job. My wife had already left hers, and we get to spend a lot of time with our family, and we homeschool our kids and live on a farm, and it's kind of the lifestyle that we set out for.
I love it, man. You just gave some great insights talking about how you were able to scale and taking that first project, take some lessons learned, and go out there and build kind of a portfolio, buying kind of, these single family houses or smaller, residential type homes, and then creating more units within them, doing the renovation. You mentioned the one you bought for 94K, put about, what'd you say, 200K into it. So,
200 total, yeah, between the
200
purchase
total. So
and
about
rehab.
100K
Yeah,
into it in the
yeah,
rehab, you're 200K in and you're profit, cash flowing 2,500 a month. So really great business plan. You said something that was very insightful, and I'll make sure everyone understands this because I think a lot of people started hearing about short-term rentals and Airbnbs and ran and didn't do this one thing. When you were making these investments, you still made sure they worked as long-term rentals. So you had a plan B. It
yes,
wasn't just awesome, we're going to make this great cash flow. Well, what if something happens? What if you can't for whatever reasons because the market changes, demand changes, regulations change? You knew that they still worked as regular long-term rentals, which is why you had that flexibility. I think that's a really powerful insight because you always want to know what happens if that first plan doesn't work. And I think this is true for any real estate strategy. If you invest in real estate and things only work if everything goes perfect or only with one strategy, that would be very concerning to me. You always want to have multiple exits. So you need to look at it to say, okay, what happens if I can't rent this? What happens if I can't flip this or sell it in time? What happens if I can no longer do short-term rentals? When you understand the different options and how much flexibility you have, that's going to actually give you more power to make the right decision. So I love that you shared that and thought it was a really important point to highlight there. A couple things came out to me as you were talking. You're buying these properties, you're able to get, really attractive residential loans on them, right? Because you're, buying at the sweet spot. And these are residential properties. As you are scaling, the two things that I think most people struggle with, especially in the short-term rental space, is the management of these properties. The management, the cleaning companies, the terms between the guests. How do you manage that yourself?
yeah, it's a good question. We've learned a lot over the years. We have always done it ourselves. Initially, in our basement, it was my wife with our 1-year-old, attached to her hip, and she's cleaning the properties, and we're responding between she and I. She's host and co-host, and I was working full time, and so we did it all, and then we learned that that's not the best way to do, especially as you're scaling. So the two key team members that we have now are the handyman and cleaner. And if you have those two people, they can handle all the boots on the ground activities. And I was my own worst enemy the first year. As we're starting to build the portfolio, I thought I needed to be that guy who showed up if the guest had any issues, if they couldn't figure out the keypad, and so I'm constantly over at these properties. And then I realized a good handyman, now we have an older gentleman who's a retired union, construction worker. Like, he knows construction inside. He can figure out pretty much any problem. He has a lot of time on his hands. It's just the perfect fit. This is the type of role he's looking for. And so there's properties right down the road that I haven't been to in over a year because we have great cleaners and we have a great handyman. And so if you think about the cost of a short-term rental property manager, typically on average, it's around 25% of your income. So when I look at our whole portfolio, that's an insane amount as we built this out. You can justify kind of on one property, but it's coming off your bottom line because it doesn't eliminate the need for a cleaner or a handyman. You're still paying that exact same cost for those services, but you're just adding in this 25% expense line item to handle, the bookings and that sort of thing. So as we've grown, once we got to 4 or 5 properties, we added a guest services person who's a VA that works remotely. We pay them hourly when they're working on our properties. and they respond to all the guest bookings and all the questions. And so we're not involved in the day to day, but it still cash flows extremely high, and we're not spending a huge chunk on a professional property manager.
I think it's really important to understand because a lot of folks don't really understand some of the nuances. What you just talked about was, there's this balance of doing the work yourself, showing up, not really running it like a business, but now it's kind of taxing you because this is now a second job. And, when you have a guest who stays and they check out at 10 or 11, you got
Yeah,
to get there, clean it, and turn everything, make sure everything looks right. It definitely could be a lot of work over a short spurt of time. So it could be, definitely way more active than say, a long-term rental where you really don't have to go over there unless there is something broken. But if you hire a management company, again, they're taking 20, 25%, usually a significant amount of the profit. And it doesn't alleviate you from paying the handyman, the cleaning company, and the other things. So it can actually hit to a considerable amount of profits. We're talking 20, 25% of revenue. It could end up being closer to like 40 or 50% of the profits.
yeah.
So you definitely want to figure out, how can you manage this and build scale if this is something you want to go down. Talk to me a little bit about your criteria, because I think it's great when you go out there and you help people. And by the way, I do want to call out that you've got two things where you help people: your podcast, Living Off Rentals, but then you also have a program called your first vacation rental investment blueprint. So I know that you help people take these steps to grow and scale. And if you're interested in learning more, we're definitely going to give you the resources to follow up with Kirby here. But Kirby, as I listen to you talk about Michigan City in particular, you know, that's close to the water, right? That's close to Lake Michigan. When
Mhm.
you look at your criteria, what are the things that are important? I mean, do you have to be right up on the water? Do you have to be within a mile? Does it have to be a certain square footage? Like, what's your buy box look like?
Yeah, this is a great question, and this is something I've thought a lot about, because it works. The good thing is it works in a lot of locations, but it can feel overwhelming to try to narrow it down. And so here's where I start. I start with the part of the country that's on sale. So to me, that's the Midwest and Southeast. If you look at a map, like compared to the coasts, it just is a lot cheaper per square foot. So I start there, and then I want to be close to population. You kind of need people in order to make this business work. I don't want to be in cities though. Typically, if you look at any big city, there's lots of red tape, lots of bureaucracy. It's just a challenge to do this. So I try to pick the more business friendly states, find the cities, but then I look within an hour drive of the cities, and I'm looking for local draws. So you mentioned Lake Michigan is one. We also have a casino here. There's an outlet mall. There's wineries. There's restaurants and stuff. There's just things to do. Notre Dame's 45 minutes away, so people stay there for games, or stay in our places for games. So stuff like that. It doesn't have to be Disney World, but it could be just like a traveling sports facility that constantly people are coming for traveling baseball or soccer or whatever, stuff like that outside of the city where you can buy a property for a fourth of the cost as the exact same property downtown. But everybody thinks you got to be downtown in that city. There's plenty of people that live in the suburbs that don't mind driving, to just outside of the city. So you're buying it at a fourth of the cost. But if you look at the nightly rates, they might be 20, 30% less just outside of the city, but you just got it for a fourth of the cost. So your ROI and cash flow is off the charts. Then you combine that with a small multi-unit property where you're renting each unit out as a short-term rental. And the properties just they tend to work really well in that situation. And the other thing is you can sometimes find places. I feel like Michigan City is this way, where when I was in Chicago, I didn't feel like 20 years from now, it's going to be in a much better place based on the decision making, based on taxes, based on crime, like the direction it's heading. It makes it very difficult to improve the conditions. Michigan City isn't like the mecca of places to be or anything. There's challenges there, but things are just improving. They're bringing in a lot more tourism. They're closing down. There's a old jail there. They're closing down. They're closing down this power plant that's right on the water that kind of messes up the skyline there. like they're doing things that are improving it to where I feel like 20 years from now, it's going to be a much better city than it is today. And so I'm buying in the path of progress where I can buy these properties at a really inexpensive price. There's draws that bring in people today. So the cash flow is high today. And in the meantime, over the next 20 years, the value of the property just will increase over time to where you're getting kind of the best of all worlds.
Kirby, you just get some great information. You said for you, you definitely want to make sure there's a draw, right? So we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at those big cities, but instead of investing into those big cities, look within, maybe an hour's drive outside of it, because there you can get a discount, maybe, buying stuff for 25% of what you would get in the city. And you said something that, man, I love the way you said it. And it's something I've thought and I've said it differently, but I've never said it the way you've said it. But you said you start by buying where properties are on discount, and that's going to be the
Yeah.
Midwest and the Southeast region. And it's so obvious, but the way you said it just makes so much sense, right? If we're investors, investors want to buy properties at a discount. We want to buy properties that are on sale, right? And we want to create value. And part of that is understanding why something is cheaper and why it's on sale, and then what kind of returns can you get. And that's what we're doing as investors, whether you're buying A class stuff or you're buying C class stuff or whatever your strategy is. Ultimately, you're trying to figure out properties where there's some demand, try to figure out where you think the value is today, where can you buy properties at a discount, and then where can you get kind of that best ROI possible. And the way you've kind of stacked your strategy, first of all, taking the first layer of that stack, which is investing in the Midwest and Southeast as opposed to maybe the more expensive coastal states, then looking at the major cities or the major places in those markets. But instead of investing there, investing kind of on the outskirts within that hour drive, and then making sure that you're investing in smaller multifamily type properties where you get two, three, four units within them. And then having some draws, whether it be local sports facilities and complexes, or, Michigan City has a lot of different draws, but different things that are going to get you some natural tourism that's going to allow you to be successful. So you just stack like three or four things in a row. And I say this because when we initially launched this show, it was all about finding the best places to invest. And we
Mm.
realized everyone had a different strategy. But the way you kind of mitigate your risk and mitigate your losses is by stacking two, three, four, five of these concepts together. And at that point, you kind of built a impenetrable, force field to help you succeed. So love everything you said there. Kirby, I mentioned your podcast earlier, Living Off Rentals. What can listeners find or check out or expect if they tune into your show?
Yeah, so the show is experts like yourself, who come on and just share lessons learned. The 100th episode, I brought on Robert Kiyosaki actually,
Nice.
which was cool because it's kind of full circle because that was the book that got me started. So it's really cool to be able to sit down with him for 45 minutes and have a conversation. And other people like that, people who've written great books on cash flow. I mean, it's specifically related to getting to a place where you can leave your 9 to 5 job and live off the income from your rental properties. I mean, that was our goal from the beginning. Our goal was not to, own thousands of doors and just be the biggest syndicator in the world. Like, God bless you if that is your goal. I'm not saying that's a bad goal. I just that what changed that one of the biggest um, the most important things we did after my wife and I got married was to get super clear on what we wanted our days to look like, get super clear on the outcome that we're after. Because if not, you just kind of chase success as like this vague term and you'll do whatever you think feels like success. To us, then it made it very clear what decisions and opportunities to say yes and no to and how to backwards plan from there. So we wanted to live on a farm. This wasn't like an accident, like we ended up, we have to live on a farm. Like that was what we chose. We want to grow our own food and, you know, homeschool our kids. And like, this was a lifestyle that we really enjoy. And so to get to that place, we knew financial freedom was key to that. A 9 to 5 job where I was driving downtown Chicago every day was going to be tough to live the lifestyle that we wanted. And so we were able to kind of backwards plan our way into this lifestyle. But if that's not clarified, you'll just kind of always be in this chase success mode that and you'll never even know what success looks like when you get there. It's always this bridge too far, so that was the biggest difference for us, I'd say.
I love it. Well, listen, check out Living Off Rentals, the podcast. We'll make sure we put a link to that, as well as you've got a nice gift for listeners. If they go to your website, livingoffrentals.com/start, you can learn more about investing in rentals and some of the stuff that you have available. There's some great resources. So check that out as well, livingoffrentals.com/start. Kirby, we're going to transition to go to our round of insights. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
I would say, the one that stands out is the beginning when we're starting to flip, working with contractors. I was just really kind of naive in the beginning and thought that I could kind of figure it out as I went, and it was painful in the beginning. It was like there was some experiences where people, took off with money, and I just didn't know what I didn't know, and we tried to scale very quickly, and so I think having that experience, it was invaluable in the fact that, I learned so much from it, and I learned how to be much smarter and control what we're doing a lot better. But I'd say if you're just getting started, that can be a place that ends a lot of real estate investors' careers right there, is when you're doing these construction jobs, especially once you get into gut rehabs, it can be very, very costly. So I'd say that's probably the biggest one.
Were those projects in Chicago, by the way?
Yes.
All right. After we're done recording, you and I will talk more about that.
Yeah.
But we'll keep that separate there. All right. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
We use one that is top of mind is Turno. So I just had the CEO of Turno on my podcast yesterday, and it's a great resource for managing the whole cleaning aspects of your business, which is one of the hardest aspects. So they have a marketplace of cleaners in different areas, and they bid on your jobs, and then you can manage them through the platform. You can pay them through the platform. You can monitor that the cleaning is happening the right way. There's a lot of different tools they've integrated over the years, and so I'd say that's a great one if you're getting into short-term rentals to manage one of the hardest parts of it.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
There's two, and I recommend them both. Share them both with the people I work with. Number one is Effortless, which is kind of an extension of Essentialism. So Greg McKeown wrote it, and it talks about this concept of linear versus residual results. And so, most people work for a paycheck, and they get linear results. You work time, you get paid, and you got to put in more time. Residual results are when you work on something that pays you indefinitely. So when you set up a short-term rental that's going to pay you for the rest of your life, but you do all the work up front to set it all up, and then it's pretty limited going forward. So once you start changing your mindset to thinking working in residual results, I think that it changes a lot in your life. And then the other one is Profit First for Real Estate Investing. David Richter is the author of that. I give this book as a gift to everybody I work with, but we operate on the Profit First system that allows us to really have a clear handle on where all our finances are, which is not the case in the beginning. When we were flipping, we had sort of one pot, everything went in, and we tried to figure out which money was for which projects, and it was difficult. So I'd highly recommend implementing the Profit First system. And the Profit First has been around for a while. Mike Michalowicz wrote that, but David Richter took it and streamlined it for real estate investors specifically.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
I have a lot of daily habits. For me, fitness is a huge one. And I don't know if that answers the question specifically on staying focused on my goals, but I think that's been a pretty key part in everything else. And if I hadn't had fitness as a focus over the years, I think it would have been very difficult to continue to operate on the level that we have, in terms of continuing to achieve the goals, other goals that we have, because everything just relies around fitness and health so much. So we're really into eating clean, fitness, working out, living a healthy lifestyle. And, if you do that, you can do so much more than somebody else who's, just not focused on that. And, they're always struggling with their energy level and with clear, mental capacity and all that. So I think that's been key for us.
Give me your number one insight for scaling a short-term rental business.
Um, get really clear on the outcome that you want and make sure that the properties that you are purchasing are the absolute best to achieve that clear outcome. And what I mean is that I talk to people at least weekly now, it's almost every day, who own short-term rentals that specifically want to work with me because they've realized that they've bought these short-term rentals that everybody talks about, all the gurus out there talking about these, Smoky Mountain cabins for $1 million. And so they went out there, bought these properties because they're super sexy. I mean, it's awesome to show on social media that you own one of these properties. And they seem like these are the ones that would make a whole bunch of money because they've got all the amenities and they're really flashy. But then they call me and they're like, I'm losing money every month on this thing. And I own this cool property, but it's not getting me any closer to my goals. I'm actually working harder now to support this anchor that I own, as opposed to getting clear on the type of property that's going to get you to freedom the quickest, which is a super high cash flowing property typically. And so I'd say if you want to scale, don't just start buying a bunch of short-term rentals that seem intuitively like the type of properties that make the most sense, but get really clear on the ones that are going to get you to your specific goal.
I love that. Great insight and great feedback there. Let's go in a different direction here. You talked about eating clean. So not sure how often you go out or you have some great places there, but give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Yeah, we actually don't that much anymore, but because it's tough to go out. I'd say there's a place in Valparaiso called Stacks that's it's modeled after a library. So you walk in and it's like you feel like you're in like an old library. There's books all over the place. They have a cool rooftop. So if we go out, that's a fun place to go. But yeah, we cook a lot of our own food.
I love it. Stacks it is, man. Well, listen, you gave us some great stuff, Kirby. You talked about kind of your background, coming from the military, really wanting to get into rentals basically after watching kind of your parents and realizing, hey, this is the path I want to go down here more. And from there, started off with the flipping business, transitioned into rentals, and then kind of really found your sweet spot in this short-term rental space. And I love the strategy you laid out. You got a lot of great tools and resources that can help other investors who are looking to get into this space. And like you said, it's not about buying necessarily the sexy property that is IG worthy, but making sure you're focusing on cash flowing assets. The point I underlined here was, you're focused on not just cash flow, but buying properties at a discount, buying properties where as investors, we can create the value. And I think that's going to help so many people make so much money with their investments. Again, if you want to learn more, get started with the programs that you've got there, Kirby, they can check out your website. Go to livingoffrentals.com/start and check out what you have to offer there. Kirby, thanks again for being a great guest and coming to Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
John, it's been great. Thanks a lot.